Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. We've got a treat today. Daniel House, the man who started as the founder of Gophers Guru, is going to be on today, and he will be talking about this Minnesota Gophers team that comes into Champaign with a 3-game winning streak. And after Illinois' rough outing against Oregon, there's a lot of people who think this could be Minnesota's game to take. Daniel, how are you looking at this game overall coming into this week?
I think it's a fun matchup on the road in Champaign. Everybody will be juiced up 11 a.m. Lots on the line for both teams. Illinois trying to come off the loss to Oregon, find themselves, correct some stuff, and Minnesota playing hot right now. Everything's clicking on both sides of the ball. I thought they played their most complete game against Maryland. Defensively, offensively, special teams, just complimentary football. This game has a lot on the line for both teams, especially when you look at the remaining portions of their schedule.
Yeah. As we come into this, Minnesota comes in with a quarterback who's on fire. Can you tell us a little bit about this transformation? Because I will tell you right now, Rutgers is dealing with the ups and downs that Minnesota had to deal with, and that was a great decision for PJ Fleck.
Yeah, taking Max Brosmer in the transfer portal ended up being an outstanding move. 5 years of experience at New Hampshire, was one of the top quarterbacks in the FCS last year. And, digging into Max before he got here, it was just the intelligence stood out. I mean, he got through all his reads and progression and throw a lot to the back. I mean, Dylan Lobby's with the Las Vegas Raiders right now. And he's someone that he threw the ball a lot to, which I always thought, like, oh, hey, that shows he's able to read the defense and get down to the check down and the progression. So when he got here, it was immediate, like, hey, I want to make sure I can get to my check down, have that as a component of the offense. He's done really well in the red zone. He sees the field well, able to manipulate defenders, throw the ball with good ball placement and accuracy on that area of the field. I think as the season's gone on, he's gained more comfort. Going from the FCS to the Power Five level took about a game for him to just understand. Here's how the throwing windows are. Here's how you shape the football at this level. And since then, I mean, he is just really firing. 80.5% adjusted completion percentage right now. So suiting the strengths of what Minnesota wants to do offensively. They're able to really use the quick passing game, quick game concepts, being able to get the ball out to the backs, use the screen game. You look at their screens, they're running 3, 4 more screens a game than they did last year. Running back routes are up to be able to get the check down, like I said. So he has been very accurate, good decisions, taking care of the football, and really running the system at a high level.
And boy, that's what Brett Bielema loves out of a quarterback is someone who can do that, play complementary football, and don't turn the ball over.
Yeah, and I mean that's been the recipe for success. They've done a really good job of being able to maximize their weapons. Daniel Jackson had a really great game against Maryland, and he's had just an outstanding season. Everybody knows him for just his hands. I mean, the grab he had in the Michigan game where he couldn't even see the ball and maintains the body control and doesn't even have an eye on it, is able to bring it in with his other hand. And then you look at some of the catches he's been able to make throughout the year. Last week, we had some really good routes. There's one where they were able to motion him in and get him some leverage on the defensive back, set a pick, and he's able to make a play on the ball. And just countless examples of really good route running. I know Aaron Henry today was calling him one of the most underrated receivers in the country. So there's a lot of respect there. Elijah Spencer's had a good year. Second year, he's a transfer from Charlotte last season. Took him a bit to get his footing last season, but now, with a quarterback in here that they can get him the football, scheme him open opportunities. He's done well. I mean, they've been able to really rotate the football around, spread it around to tight end Jamison Gears, Darius Taylor out of the backfield catching the ball. I mean, he's a receiver in high school, so being able to use some of those skills as well. They've been able to spread the ball around. I think that's a sign of a good offense. It's when you're able to get everyone involved. A lot of people talk about, balance 50-50 run pass, but I think it's more about creating space in the passing game by getting everyone involved and then, taking what the defense can give you. And I think Minnesota's been able to do that well this year, using the quick game more as an extension of the rushing attack, and the screens and that type of thing. That's a new element in Minnesota's offense. They're definitely change the way that they approach offensive football this year.
I guess the way people looked at Minnesota was it was going to be all run, run, run. And this year we've seen a totally different approach. Do you see anything in your breakdown of Illinois film? Do you see anything that you're expecting that offense to focus on based on the matchups that are in front of them?
Yeah, I was really looking at Illinois' run defense. I thought there's some stuff that they could do in the perimeter run game, toss game, maybe screens, that type of thing. Minnesota's done a really good job with the screen game, being able to introduce concepts that maybe they ran earlier in the year from a passing game standpoint, and then add just a screen wrinkle off of it. That's like booting one way, come back the other with a throwback to the back or wide out. They've done a good job at that. So I think like altering the eye discipline of Iowa's or Illinois' defense. I think there's been some things that I've noticed, especially like double moves downfield off the quick game concepts, maybe a defensive back getting an eye in the wrong spot. That was my takeaway was just inconsistency defending the run and then some eye discipline things in the second and third level of the defense. So I think there's some stuff that they'll be able to do schematically to take advantage of those things. And then, getting some good blocking angles. I mean, I thought that, Oregon was kind of motioning the field side wide receiver in tight to get an angle and get your defensive backs kind of in some positions where they had to make some plays and maintain the edge. So I think there's some things that Minnesota will do run game wise. This year, I think, like we said, they're more of a extension of the rushing attack with the quick game and the screens. I think this is a game where they might run the ball a little bit more to take advantage of some of the matchups that they could create.
Yeah, Illinois has struggled at times defending the run, and it's been a little bit of smoke and mirrors. They have been able to successfully in many games bait quarterbacks into throwing the ball, actually overriding the call and throwing the ball into a coverage that they don't anticipate. Even fooled Dylan Gabriel once. When they did the same thing to Jalen Daniels earlier in the season, they suckered him into thinking he's running into a certain defense and then found out that, oh my goodness, the safety wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. And it yielded interceptions in both games.
And that's the tough part about this defensive scheme. I think that's why teams have had a lot of trouble with it. You got your five down front, bear tight front type of defense, and then they'll show a presentation and just make a little bit of a different tweak to it. They'll have people mugged up, drop out into cover two or Tampa two, and put you in a spot where you got a defender dropping that you didn't think was going to drop, and there you go, boom, there's a big play. A lot of people just think it's the man free and man coverage, but there's a lot of different wrinkles off that defense. I mean, I remember the one with Sidney Brown when it's Sidney Brown and Deb Witherspoon and Quan Martin, all those guys. I mean, gosh, that was the defense that like they have everybody on the line of scrimmage and a cover zero presentation just drop out into Tampa 2 because Sidney Brown had so much range. And I still see like some of those wrinkles, but like that talent on that defense was incredible. And it's still, I mean, they still present challenges. I mean, I look at the secondary of Illinois' defense. There's a lot of injuries in there right now. I'm wondering kind of what the status is going to be for some of these guys that are dinged up back there. I think that's a huge storyline as well.
Yeah, Brett Bielema's gonna play that close to the vest. I think he had a few years with Bill Belichick, so there's no piece of information that can't be withheld for an advantage, which you got to grab every bit you can get. I do think Illinois safeties have played very well this year, defensive backs overall, but they have had some issues with what you were talking about, especially you saw it a little bit in the Penn State game. And to be honest, I don't know that there's any team in the Big Ten, maybe Ohio State, and I say maybe, that's as quick as Oregon. And
Wow.
Illinois could literally Oregon could just do 3 and 4 yard passing plays because if you get those guys with their speed and combination of lateral quickness, you get them into space and it's 15 yards. It was just a real challenge for the Illini. I'm not trying to, be facetious here, but how fast and how quick are the Minnesota wide receivers? And I'm not saying you have to compare them to Oregon.
I mean, they have some quickness in their wide receiver room. I mean, I think, ability to create yards after the catch, that's another notable thing with Minnesota. They were toward the bottom half of the country in yards, total yards after the catch. Now you look at this season, numerous games where they're over 100 yards after the catch each week. So I think that's been a takeaway of just what they're doing route design wise, formationally. being able to get matchups, motion players around, increase in motion offensively, just to be able to move Daniel Jackson around and get him a lot of mismatches. He's been, someone that they're trying to, make it hard for the defense to figure out where your best playmakers are. And I think that's one of the challenges that Illinois will face, is like just keeping an eye on the alignments of everybody, whether that's, Daniel Jackson motioning into a bunch, whether that's motioning into a stack. You're going to see a lot of that, tight stack, switch releases to get, freer access for the receivers, just based on Illinois scheme, trying to create natural rubs and picks. So, I think Minnesota with, Jackson, Spencer, Christian Driver didn't play last week. He might be back. He gives them some juice out of the slot. Lemecki Brockington is someone who's really good as a run blocker. He'll probably be a huge part of this game. I think you're going to see him kind of get in tight to create some angles, maybe crack blocking, doing some things to get out on the perimeter. I think that's an area that Minnesota is going to try to exploit against Illinois this week.
Do we think this could be a week that Darius Taylor looks a little more like the Darius Taylor versus Nevada and USC? The opportunity, certainly the temptation to try to exploit him would be there this week, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at, maybe using some outside and mid zone, getting him out on the perimeter. That's been the cool part about Darius. He's a lead in the conference in receiving targets. So, just because he's not running the ball, it doesn't mean he's not impacting the game. He's had a lot of forced missed tackles in the receiving game. Being able to just get 5 yards on first down just opens up the whole play calling flow. Minnesota in the past, they haven't been as efficient in that area. This year, standard down success rate, they're a top 25 offense in that respect. So they've been able to stay ahead of the sticks, and I think that's helped them. Now, you look at Darius, he's able to make that first defender miss on the perimeter. Tackling has to be on point. I think that's something that he's done a really good job of, is just being able to make that first guy miss. So I think that's something that Illinois this is a game where tackling is going to be very important for them. And I didn't think, I thought last week's scheme for Illinois was really okay. Going to play a little bit more zone in than you typically would, just because you're like, okay, well, this team is so fast. Maybe
Yeah.
just let them try to paper cut you up the field, run the ball occasionally, make them go on longer drives. So now, we'll see what the schematic approach is this week, more back to the old style that you would be accustomed to playing Illinois and what they do typically.
Oregon proved that they could do that too. It was a very challenging game. And you, as
Hmm.
an Illini fan, I go back to the first third down of the game when Illinois should have forced a punt, and Illinois probably wasn't going to beat Oregon. But you wonder, how does the game evolve if the defense gets a 3 and out in the first drive versus then Oregon's feeling fantastic about themselves? That's a tough place to play against a really good team. How do you think the offense is going to deal with keeping Gabe Yakas off of the quarterback?
Yeah, I was impressed. Gabe Yakas and Seth Coleman. Briggs, I thought's a pretty good player too. I was very impressed with him as a transfer. I think he fits the scheme quite well. I think that, Minnesota pass protection wise, I thought this was the best game they played coming in the bye week, just evaluating everything they've done. I think their consistency at times, they're trying to get cohesive as a group, get things going. And I thought last week they did a pretty good job. Ariante Ursary, the left tackle, could be a first round pick this year. Very fluid moving athlete. Really good in the run game as well. I think that's something that people will really like in the NFL draft process. He's someone that has just consistently improved every single year, and I think Minnesota fans really kind of view him as a cornerstone player of the whole offense. So he's someone that definitely will be tasked with keeping Yakas in check. I know that, I think Illinois is probably going to hit Minnesota with a lot of interior stunts, a lot of game stuff like that. So communication up front is going to be a big element of this scheme. And I'm curious kind of how Illinois schemes up their pressure packages, because I think they're going to mix a lot of exotics in there to try to create a little mistake here or there and get a sack. I think that's something that, Minnesota is going to have to be ready for. Is, you can't, sacks just kill drives. And if Illinois is going to be successful in this game, they're going to have to knock Minnesota off track, because they've been very good at staying efficient on first and second down. So that they're going to be pretty aggressive early and often, I think, from Aaron Henry's scheme for this game.
So Any other offensive thoughts that come to mind before we move over to that Golden Gophers defense?
I think we covered a lot of it. Marcus Major is another back to keep an eye on. He's one of more of a one cut downhill physical runner. Is able to find yardage that maybe isn't there. I thought he had a couple really good runs. He's a transfer from Oklahoma. Good compliment to Darius Taylor. Two different types of rushing styles. So you'll see a dose of those two. Jordan Newman will get in the game a little bit in passing situations because they really like the way that he can pass protect. So those are a few other personnel people to keep an eye on. Quinn Carroll's the right tackle, a very solid, experienced player. You know, the interior at right guard is kind of that spot where they've been trying to figure out what to do. Quinn started at right guard earlier in the year, then he slid out to right tackle. They've been playing Ashton Beers there. Yeah, it's been his first little taste of playing. Thought he played a better game this week, starting to get used to playing what it takes in the Big Ten, what they're doing schematically. So, right guard and center with Greg Johnson, a first year starting at center, was a left guard previously. Keep an eye on those two in the interior. They're the ones that are trying to kind of get their footing, and I feel like they've been a little better.
One thing I have noticed is I have a hard time sometimes knowing how good a team is because if you get a couple of the right teams in the Big Ten, you can look a little healthier than you really are, or you could be. I mean, look, Purdue's a train wreck. There's no doubt, but they've also got a schedule that is just a nightmare. And I sometimes wonder that you almost have to appease the schedule gods to give yourself an even better opportunity. And I would use Indiana as my case in point for that.
And there's just so many variables now, like how your transfers you take, how do they fit in? James Madison is an example. You know, him coming from James Madison, being able to bring a lot of guys with him, had a lot of coaching staff continuity, but they also turned the dial and brought in other transfers from spots to kind of pair up with the returning talent. I
Yep.
think that's team to team. You kind of got to look at this. Okay, how do you build your team? What's your strategy? What productive players did you bring in? I listened to Brett Bielema this offseason. I love what he was talking about when he said, you know, when you lose productive players, you have to replace them with productive players. And I think Illinois has done a really good job of that, whether that's going to the FCS level, getting a guy like Melvin Priestley, who I think is, you know, played maybe his best game last week against Oregon, against and facing a really tough challenge. But I think, you know, you're speaking to it that competitive parity of college football now, or like the middle of the pack, is just so even. I think it magnifies coaching, your scheming, your development, how you run your program, in-game coaching, all that stuff is magnified more because these teams are so clustered together that I mean, gosh, how do you gain how do you gain that little bit of an edge? Is it through eval, roster building, coaching? That's a fascinating part for schools like Minnesota and Illinois that I think are pretty similar in terms of landscape.
Yeah, I do think that for the teams in the middle, it's very much like the NFL, where the guy or the staff who can take care of the details the best
Mhm.
tend to win a little more because they don't have the little things falling out of control. Obviously, the difference between college football and the NFL is you got the guys on top who not only get a win, but they get all the first round draft choices. So it makes it a little
Yeah,
more
and
challenging.
you look at rev share coming here soon. I think that's going to help a coach like Brett Bielema, who you know is just an outstanding talent evaluator. When the playing field leveled, and you can coach it up, you can get the players, you know, not have that huge disparity in terms of money and what's available. I mean, there's still going to be that with NIL, and there's still going to be things to figure out, but even having that rev share where there's somewhat of a distribution there, I think that's going to help teams like Illinois, Minnesota, those middle of the pack squads. But I know Brett, that's going to be big for him.
I hope you're correct. I'm a little more cynical than you are because I'm a lot older. And I tend to look at this as Ohio State is not going to look at a 5-star center and go, gosh, we're out of money now. I guess he goes to Minnesota or Illinois, and we'll get him next. We'll get him next year when he transfers. I feel like they will find a way with NIL, or will we see the bag man come back? I don't know. I'm
I don't know. We'll find out. We'll
yeah
find
yeah.
out.
So when we look at the Minnesota defense, they come into this game the 12th ranked scoring defense in the country. This is a very solid Minnesota defense. Tell us a little bit about the strengths of the defense and who Illinois is game planning for right now as we speak.
You look at it, brand new defensive coordinator and Corey Heatherman, Joe Rossi went to Michigan State. A lot of the same staff is here that was with Rossi, but Heatherman brought a little bit of a different imprint, his style. And I think just overall right now, what I notice with Minnesota's defense is the rush and coverage tying together very well. And I think that's a sign of a good defense where, you rush in four, you're able to pin the pocket, get some interior push, impede quarterback vision platform, throwing launch pattern, all that stuff, and then also have your zone drops be precise and tight where you're forcing the quarterback to have to hold that ball just a little bit longer, and that gives your pass rush a chance to get home. I thought that was a huge factor in a few of these games. Minnesota came out against USC and they said, well, you know what, USC on film being able to stretch teams vertically and up the seam, what they were able to do downfield in the vertical passing game and the screens. They decided to come out in a little bit of like a cover two, Tampa two invert type of scheme where you got your corners dropping back into the deep half. You got a middle hole runner type of player where he can keep his eyes on the quarterback, be able to trace screens. And then you got your underneath defenders kind of just dropping into the flats. Just more of a replacement cover two, Tampa two type of defense that it really made USC quarterback Miller Moss have to kind of stand back there, let the rush be able to get upfield just a little bit longer, and then it was just able to eliminate the explosives and kind of force them to have to work their way up the field, run the ball. You're going to give up a couple runs here or there, but they kind of had that game plan where they were able to tie the rush and the coverage together. And I think last week was another example. Billy Edwards being able to keep him in the pocket, don't let him get to that second play. Minnesota's ability to roll coverage, change the coverage picture, do some things that kind of tie together with coverage, like simulated pressure, where you got a defensive end dropping back into coverage, you're replacing with a linebacker, safety, corner. That allows you to not have to blitz. You look like you're blitzing, but you're really rushing four, sending somebody from a different spot. Just a lot of different presentation things that Minnesota's done. They've been more multiple. They got a dime package now where they get six defensive backs on the field, and that has really allowed them to do some stuff with zone coverage week to week. So it's hard for offensive coordinators to kind of get a beat on the type of style that Minnesota has defensively. So I guess I would say multiple and versatile is kind of the two words I'd use to describe Minnesota's year defensively. Still kind of the hallmark of what they've done in the past, eliminating the big play, stopping the run, but just being more multiple based on the styles you see week to week, which I think is key in the Big Ten now with the different styles you see week to week.
This is the run my own business dream. This is the colleges paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
How do you think they will match up with Illinois' wide receivers who've been pretty effective this year? Although Pat Bryant is certainly a topic of discussion whether he will play or not. We have had the good fortune at the Illini guys to talk to some NFL scouts, and of course, they are very high on him. So we're hoping he can play on Saturday, but in a concussion protocol does make you wonder if he'll be able to.
Yeah, I've been impressed with the wideout room. Pat Bryant being able to make plays at all three levels. I really like how you can get position, attack the football, a good route runner. Franklin's been good as well. I mean, he was a great player at UTSA. Going to Ole Miss didn't really work out there, but now coming to Illinois, and now you're seeing that production of what he's been able to do in the offensive system. And you got some younger receivers that are getting some time, in Dixon and BDC in action, Malik Elzy. Like, they have a lot of different players that can get involved. I've been, looking at Illinois, watching them play, watching all the games back. I thought offensive line wise, I feel like they're starting to get more cohesive up there. And
Yes.
you're bringing in two transfers in JC Davis, you got Melvin Priestley in there, trying to figure out how that group's going to work together. It takes time, and I feel like now we're starting to see them click a little bit more. I think they were able to run the ball a little bit better. McCray is super physical, someone that Minnesota's going to have to swarm to. I really like how Lunny mixes it up in the run game and does a good job of marrying the run and pass concepts together. You get your gap schemes, you got your tight zone and wide zone. 21, I think he's been, a really impressive back. This last week, the last 2 games, I've noted him being able to catch the ball. I think he's got good burst ability to make the first guy miss. I've been impressed with him. But you look at Illinois. I think offensively, what I like most about Barry Lang, I got a lot of respect for how he sets up his offensive schemes formationally to be able to make the defense think, hey, this is the type of design that I ran earlier in the game or earlier in the season. You make one little tweak, make it look complex for the defense, but it's really easy for your playmakers and your quarterback. What I'm most concerned about for Minnesota is the play extension ability of Luke Altmaier. To be able to get to that second play, slip out, scramble, make plays with his legs. I think that's been something that's killed Minnesota in the past when playing Illinois is Altmaier's scrambling ability in a long down passing situation, slipping out, breaking the edge, and picking up 12 yards on 3rd and 11 and being able to keep a drive alive. So I would say pin pockets is going to be the big thing for Minnesota. I want to see how the run defense holds up. I think they played some teams with different stylistic wrinkles, I would say, more of quick game, pass game type of styles. I want to see now when they're playing a team like Illinois that has got that foundational element of being able to run the football. What does it look like? Does Illinois maybe do some 6-OL stuff to try to really pound this football? I'm interested in kind of what Bielema's game plan is.
We don't ever tempt Bielema to put more offensive linemen in. Ever since the Barge package against Penn State that won the 9 overtime game, that's been a calling card.
Give me the Barge.
When you look at Altmaier, he has been very consistent at between 1 and 3 times a game, getting a key first down. And he reminds me a little bit, and I know this is kind of a joke, but he reminds me a little bit of Tom Brady. He's not a great runner, but he knows how to take the 1 step or the 2 step to get out of the way of the rush, and then he can make you pay. My biggest concern with him is please slide. Don't allow someone to get a hit at you 12 yards down the field and you've already gotten 2 yards past the first down. The risk reward ratio of getting hit out there is just not worth it for 2 more yards.
Well, I say the biggest difference I've noticed from Altmaier is decision making as well. Not putting the ball in harm's way nearly as much, making that decision where it's hey man, just throw the ball away. Go down, take the sack. I still think ball security is something I'm watching. Minnesota's done a really good job. Ja Joyner is someone to watch, a dynamic pass rusher. Anthony Smith, who can kick inside. They like to do some overload front type of stuff. We'll have 3D linemen on one side. They got a linebacker mugged and then another defensive end on the other end. Ja Joyner is really good at getting around the edge and getting his length into the quarterback where you'll be able to strip, get your hands up. I think Minnesota had 3 batted balls at the line of scrimmage against Maryland. They did a really nice job of getting their hands up. So I'm looking at tip balls, being able to potentially strip. I think Altmaier at times could take better care of the ball. And this is a game where honestly, you look at these Big Ten matchups where the teams are pretty even, it always seems to come down to turnovers. So I think the team that takes care of the football and doesn't make that huge mistake is probably going to end up winning this game. So Minnesota has been a very opportunistic defense. Multiple different players get interceptions. Last week going in the game, it was 8 different players have come up with an interception for Minnesota. So it's been pretty balanced. So I'd say Minnesota, if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to get a couple of 1 or 2 takeaways, and it's the same thing for Illinois.
Any part of the Illinois offense that scares you, or do you think this defense of the Gophers comes in here fairly confident, especially with really accomplishing more than what people expected out of them?
I am actually quite interested in how Minnesota handles Illinois' quick passing game. I think some of the quick game elements, how Barry Lunny sets up plays. In the past, he's had some really good package stuff up where he's run some mesh concepts and then had mesh rail off of it where you're able to hit a back out of the backfield. There's always some wrinkles that he comes into the game with where they're set up super well. And I think that's the one thing that I want to see. How does Minnesota respond to eye discipline wise? I think this is that's something that Illinois is going to try to exploit with their designs, trying to get Minnesota's second and third levels in the wrong spot. Can they, generate an explosive? I think I really like Illinois' wideouts. Like I said, Altmaier's ability to escape. I think those variables are a couple of things that could put stress on Minnesota. If you can get to that second play and move out of the pocket, that puts some stress on. And then Illinois, I feel like they're getting really close to having a game where they're going to be able to consistently run the football.
Boy,
And
would
I
that be
want to
nice.
see, and I want to see how Minnesota does with Illinois run scheme. How do they scheme it up? I think there'll be a lot of gap schemes. Minnesota's going to have to be really good at block deconstruction, setting hard edges. Quarterback run game, I think that's an element too. Altmaier being able to make some plays with his legs in that area. Testing Minnesota's eye discipline. I think that's the one thing that I want to see how Lunny schemes that up in the run and the pass. So that's the main thing I'm watching.
In terms of kicking and punting, how are the Gophers?
Big Ten kicker of the year last year, Dragan Kesic. It's been up and down. I think he had his best game last week, was able to make his field goals. People look at the stat line, and see he's missed a few kicks, but numerous examples where he missed 50 plus yard attempts where, you're coming in and hopeful that he can make it. And he's shown that he can in the past, and they tried it. And he's just missed. But there's some instances where he just, wasn't able to make the big kick. You look at the North Carolina game at the beginning of the year, that one was kind of something that set the tone. But like now, I think he's starting to really find it and be consistent. They're definitely special teams wise. I think like at punter as well. Mark Crawford, Australian punter, been in the program for a while. They're able to do what they need to do field position wise. They got one in the UCLA game where they were down and inside the 5, which was huge. He's pretty good in those like situations where it's not like open field pump that's coffin corner where he's got to pin it down. That's something to watch. Fleck will definitely take the field position, back you up, and trust his defense. So Minnesota, I think field position wise is going to be a big factor in the game. They've been a little bit more aggressive in the return game because they got a freshman out of Esco, Minnesota. He's a high 4-star player. He's very sudden and explosive in the return game. He's come close to popping one off. He almost had a return touchdown against Michigan. But that's something to watch is Illinois' coverage units managing Coy Parrish. He's someone I feel is going to have by the end of the year one of these big dynamic returns. So return game's a factor. Minnesota, they field position wise, they haven't been as good because I think they're taking it out a little bit more, not getting out to the 25 as much, not fair catching traditionally as much as they have. So keep an eye on coverage units and field position battle. I think in these type of games where it's very narrow and you got even talent, field position, it matters a lot. You can go back and look at field position margin and just see how much it defines
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, you're speaking Brett Bielema's language. Early in the season, when the Gophers were 2-3, there was a lot of PJ Fleck piling on up there. People were frustrated. I've thought he's a pretty darn good coach for Minnesota. How is the public reacting now that he's turned this season around? Are people a little more willing to believe in him right now, or what is your thoughts on that?
I think settled in. I mean, being able to win against USC, UCLA, Maryland, win games, that USC win, people were very excited about that one. Being able to, at the time USC's ranked 11, being able to pull that off. I think people are pleased with the way the offense has gone this year, just in terms of like evolving a little bit where it's looking like you're using more modern concept, motion usage, back screens, you know setting things up in the passing game, being creative with what you're doing offensively. I think that's excited people that like PJ is seeming to like have Greg Harbaugh really being super creative offensively. I think that was something that like Minnesota fans really wanted to see, and now this year they're noticing how Minnesota has definitely changed its ways in that area. I think Minnesota just now as they get ready to move into this new era with rev sharing, NIL, the challenges that come with that. Every program in the middle of the pack is going to be experiencing that. I think entering this offseason, they're going to lose a lot of quality players. So how do they replace that? What's their strategy? Are they able to hit on the evals? What will they get from past 4-year recruiting classes? I think that's going to be something to watch here as they transition because they've got a lot of really high blue chip players. Ja Joyner, Daniel Jackson, Ariante Ursary, Max Brosmer, who's playing at such a high level. Like there's some outstanding players. Justin Wally in the secondary, Ethan Robinson, an FCS transfer who's been good. I mean, there's a lot of turnover on this roster after the season, but that's going to be the challenge for PJ here, in the immediate future here is to just kind of figure out how he's going to retool this thing as they kind of enter a transition.
And finally, we come to the part of the show that Illini fans love to hear is a game prediction. And how do you see this game?
I tell you, I have gone back and forth on this. I think this is going to be a really close game. Minnesota being on the road, playing at Illinois, I think, the road game is definitely going to be a huge factor. Like Illinois fans are going to be into this game. They know it's a big one. Brett Bielema always has his teams ready to play, especially in a game like this. He's done really well against PJ Fleck coach teams. He's always had a really good plan. They've been well prepared. But I do think that Minnesota is going to be able to run the ball in this game. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor is Darius Taylor is going to be able to find some success in the outside zone scheme, be able to add some creative wrinkles in the run game to be able to sustain some drives, bleed some clock, and get off to a quick start. And I think that's one of the variables is getting off to a quick start where potentially Illinois has to climb a little bit, get back into it, and then a few big rushing plays here. They're wearing down Illinois' defense, keeping them on the field a little bit longer. I think that Minnesota is probably going to win this game about 24-21, but I think that a couple of takeaways or mistakes could definitely turn it in favor of Illinois. It's one of these games where I feel like it's really a 50-50 based on what you get from both teams and how they start the game. The first 15 minutes of the game will really define how this thing goes. Which team starts fast is probably going to put themselves in the best position.
Yeah, and I do think Illinois coming off of a Oregon loss that was disappointing, and more importantly, a very physical Oregon team. Minnesota is a tough one to have come up on the schedule. I'd much rather have a Northwestern game this week than having to deal with what Minnesota's doing, especially coming in on a 3-game winning streak. From my analysis, this is going to be a tough one. I think it's going to be a slugfest. And I do agree with you. The two factors will be who makes the least amount of mistakes, I guess 3 factors, who can run the ball. And the other one is, do you get a drive or two that allows you to pin the other team back? And can you take advantage of a punt that goes out on the 9-yard line to make that hard on the other team?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's Minnesota's offense versus Illinois' early down defense. Can Illinois stop the run? Minnesota, are they able to run the ball? If not, and they're in more passing down situations, and Illinois is able to change a picture, maybe get a turnover here or there, that'll be a factor. And I think Illinois' passing attack versus Minnesota's secondary, kind of strength on strength. How does that go? Is Minnesota able to pin the pocket, keep Luke Altmaier contained, limit the ability to get to that second play? I think that's the thing that could potentially give Illinois an edge is if Altmaier is able to make some plays with his legs, they're able to get him involved in the quarterback run game, run the ball well. It's going to be one of these games that always comes down to a little bit like who can run the ball better. And I think based on how Illinois defended the run, I think Minnesota will have that edge, and that's going to be the determining factor.
Yeah, the only other thing I think of, and this is more as a former basketball coach, coming off of playing Oregon with the speed that they have, anybody that plays Oregon and then plays somebody else the next week, unless you're in the SEC, it's going to feel like this team is a little slower than what you had to play the week before. Maybe that's going to something that's going to go for Illinois. I think that's more of a basketball thing than football, but I will tell you, watching the team speed that Oregon had last week, again, I'm not even certain if Ohio State has the quickness that Oregon team has, and then they also hit, which is a very good combination to have.
It's the whole factor. It's physicality, it's speed in the second and third levels of the defense, it's speed in the backfield, speed on the perimeter, and a quarterback that's accurate, can make plays with his legs. I mean, it's the whole package. That's a team to watch every week just because you get to see premier talent on display. And I just think that you look at Illinois getting tested like that, going out there playing that game, physical, and, I look at their secondary as well. How healthy is their secondary? That's a huge factor to me. If their secondary is like 80%, then that's another factor in my weighing in my mind is like, I think they got a lot of really talented players in that secondary. I mean, you look at Terrence Brooks, is he, healthy? Strain, is he able to play?
Yeah,
I don't
he's
know.
the one he's the one that they said was most likely to not play. If one of them doesn't, it would be Strain. Now I still not certain how much poker that Brett Bielema's playing with Pat Bryant because he
Yeah, and
could.
Torrey Cox is dinged up too, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of little
Yeah.
dings, but that's football, right?
Yep.
You hear stories over the years of offensive linemen who couldn't raise their arms above their shoulder level from like game 9 on, that type of thing.
Well, yeah, and you get to November in the Big Ten, who's ever healthier, the depth starts to show out. I mean, I was doing prep for Washington, USC, and I'm like, man, USC's whole secondary is depleted. Like
Yeah,
Washington's got injuries all over the place, and then you look at this game, and there's injuries, and so again, that's a big factor and makes it hard to even project a lot of these games in November, is because you don't really know who's healthy and who's not.
I look at Minnesota's schedule, and I think they've got a pretty tough schedule the next 3 weeks after
Absolutely.
Illinois. I'm one who's a little higher. I just think had Schiano made a better choice about quarterback, this team would, with the schedule they had, could be much better than. And then, of course, Penn State is an incredibly physical team. And then you guys finish up at Wisconsin, which they're a little Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But
Yeah.
boy, that could be a very important game depending on how the next 3 weeks go for Minnesota.
And that's why this game is really important in my eyes, just from a bowl eligibility standpoint. Looking ahead here at the games that you have remaining, you're on the road too. You got to go to Piscataway. You
Yeah,
got Penn State coming to Minneapolis, and then you're going to Wisconsin to play a rivalry game against two teams that know each other really well. And it's hard to really get a beat on Wisconsin. Their secondary has been good. They've been a little erratic playing the run. It's been kind of like Braden Locke. What are you going to get week to
right,
week?
right.
Been inconsistent there. They're able to run the ball. Their offensive line is good. So, like, you look at these games, you got to take them week to week because, like we say, how healthy are you? What players do you have available? It plays such a huge role. But that's why I say Minnesota, this is a game they're going to throw a lot of the chips in because it's a big piece in the puzzle to get the bowl eligibility at the beginning of November. And then, you've got that secured for postseason play.
Yep. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, folks. You can go to gophersguru.com. If you are not watching this, if you're listening to it, you don't see the fantastic signage that he has behind him. But I would highly encourage you. Daniel was recommended by a couple people for me to give a call to and try to get Illinois fans up to speed. You can clearly understand that he's got a handle on the game. I would encourage you to go check out his stuff. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was fun. Can't wait for the game.
Yeah, it'll be a great game. Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of Eye on the Illini. Of course, if you would like to subscribe to IlliniGuys.com, simply go there. You can click on it on the front page, and then you will have 7 days to kick the tires. On the 7th day, you get billed. It's only 27 cents a day. Come on, that's not even a tenth of a Starbucks coffee. You will enjoy it. You'll get all of our stories, most of them ahead of time. You will also you won't have to worry about any of the paywall things. So you get the whole story. And most importantly, we have our message boards where you get to talk directly to Brad, Ked, Matt, Larry, even myself. And you can bring up like, what did you mean by this? Well, what about this or what about that if you read an article and you want to know more? That's the type of stuff you can't get anywhere else. You get it at Illini Guys. We interact with our subscribers all the time because we need fanatics. Of course, fans is the short word for it. but we love Illini fanatics, Illini fans, or Big Ten fans. And we've created quite a community of really good people who are on those message boards talking back and forth, arguing about everything sports related. And we keep it like everything else, we keep it to sports. We also have the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular, our 2-hour Illini centric radio show. Go to IlliniGuys.com, hit the radio button, and you can then see all the stations that have it. It is on Friday or Saturday that it gets broadcast. Find your local station and get it and sit down and listen. Or you can go to any podcast distributor and you can search on Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. You can subscribe there and get that right to your smartphone. That's awesome. We also have our Big Ten show, Big Sports Radio, a fantastic show that goes around the Big Ten. We get all the best experts. You can hear about teams like Oregon, teams like Ohio State, all across the Big Ten, and you will get the guys, the insiders who cover them. We don't just opine on what we think things mean or what this is supposed to tell you. We get people on who know the teams and we let them talk about it. And we Heat Checks and Hail Marys podcast that comes out usually on Sunday nights or Monday nights. You can listen to me talk about a few things, usually Big Ten, Illini, could be movies, could be guy stuff, other sports, etc. We talk about those on that podcast. And we would love to have you guys as members. So please go to IlliniGuys.com and subscribe. And finally, on YouTube, we have an IlliniGuys.com YouTube feed. You can watch us for as long as you can stand us. We have a lot of our stuff on video there. But again, we would love to have you join and be a part of the subscriber community. Until next time, go Illini.